Thank you to members of the jury for taking this time out of your lives, paying attention to both the evidence and the witnesses that were presented by both sides today.
Can we publish that? Yes. Oh, wait a second. Oh. I don't have it. I still have WebEx. Maybe. Can you get rid of WebEx on the screen first? You have to click on it manually and take it off. It should. Are you showing it, Mr. Pomeroy? Very good. Now it should be showing up. Nope. Maybe you need to click out of WebEx and then come back in. Use your mouse to minimize WebEx. We're going to sit tight. We've got a technical difficulty. Nobody leave. We're going to go get a tech support. It's just down the hall. It gives us about 30 seconds. This courtroom was opened this year, or last year. So it's been here about a year, and we've had problems from day one. We've had a lot of problems. We're on the jury's TV too. Should be working. Are you doing, or is Mr. Pomeroy doing the? You're doing it.
That's probably why. I was connecting it to the lectern because that's where.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. There we go.
Okay. Thank you. You're okay. You go ahead. Play first one.
What's your name, man? Kevin? What's going on, Kevin? Is this your home?
fucking shot him. Kevin Ellis, the defendant, admitted that on July 12th...
Let's stop you for a second. I'm going to give you a mic so that we can hear you. Is it on?
It is on. Is it not high enough?
Is it working? Because you're really hard to hear.
Can you hear me?
But that's a lot better.
On July 12th, 2024, the defendant Kevin Ellis admitted that he shot and killed his brother-in-law, Matthew Restelli, in American Fork, Utah. The defense said it best in their opening statement when they said, this was an ambush, couldn't have been self-defense. But really the only question you have to answer today, we'll answer all the other questions, is whether this was self-defense or if this was murder. And the best instruction that will help you do that, if you could turn to me, would be page 46, instruction 46. And it says, a defendant can only use self-defense to the extent that the defendant reasonably believes that the force is necessary to defend himself or a third party against another person's imminent use of unlawful force. Additionally, a defendant can only use lethal force, like shooting someone, if the defendant reasonably believes it is necessary to prevent death or serious bodily injury to the defendant or a third person as a result of another person's imminent use of unlawful force. So as we go through this evidence, I want you to remember the defendant has to reasonably believe it was necessary to counteract imminent unlawful force. Now, the defendant will have you believe that he's a manipulated pawn, that he was just a tool of his mother, and the defendant didn't really choose to murder Matt that night. The evidence shows, in this case, that pawns don't do what Kevin Ellis did when he shot and killed Matt. And for as much evidence has been presented over these days, this case is actually very simple, and it really comes down to three facts. Kevin Ellis is in the living room with a pistol. There's no need to complicate it. At every single level, what happened was murder and not self-defense. Matt Restelli was excited to see his wife and kids again. He was coming from California, driving 10 hours to come and pick them up. He was not angry. He was not agitated. And he had absolutely no idea that when he walked in that front door, that the defendant was there lying in wait, ready to shoot him 7 times, 3 times in the back. Matt was given the defendant's address. He was given the gate code to the gated neighborhood. He had to drive 10 hours, all while the defendant's whole family was tracking him there. Matt's loud diesel truck pulled in front of Kevin's house, parked over the cardboard so he wouldn't leak any oil on the street. He turned on his flashers, alerting anyone else that he had stopped. The blinds to the front window of Kevin's house were open, looking directly onto Matt's truck. And as Matt went into the residence, the lights were off. The defendant lay in wait, gun in his holster. Kevin had already been alerted by Rachel that Matt was close, minutes before. Orm, find my. The front door was unlocked. The toys in the bug screen had been moved from the front. And a blanket had been put over the couch, side of the couch, right next to the front door. Make sure that none of Matt's blood would spray on it when he was shot and killed. Matt came inside to the residence and respectfully took off his shoes before he stepped onto the carpet. And he was then shot by the defendant. Matt died near the stairs where his 2 young children were sleeping upstairs. Defendant did not provide any life-saving measures, but rather the defendant waited for Matt to die so that his mother, Tracy Grist, could put a knife in his hand, his lifeless hand, so they could make it look like self-defense. When they made sure that Matt was dead, that's when they finally called 911. This is not a case of defensive habitation. This is not defense. It's not self-defense, perfect or imperfect. This was an ambush, planned killing, cold-blooded murder, a staged crime scene to make it look like self-defense. When you are deliberating and you go back there and you feel like the evidence seems voluminous, I implore you to make it simple and just go back to the timeline. And it's easy to start at 10:01 p.m. This is when Kevin Ellis received a text from Rachel Jorgensen, 5 minutes before Matt arrived. You can see that he read it, 10:01, 40 seconds. And remember, where was Kevin Ellis's phone found? It was found upstairs in his bedroom on the nightstand next to his ID and the dollar bill with the cocaine on it. 10:06 p.m. David Kruger testified that his surveillance video picked up Matt's truck coming. And we don't know whether that was 10:06:00 or 10:06:29. We know it was probably somewhere in between there because the video lasts 30 seconds. And it didn't roll over to 10:07. By the time Matt arrives, by the time the video ends, somewhere between 10:06:30 and 10:06:59. By the time the video ends, you can tell that Matt hasn't turned his flashers on, so we know he hasn't gone out of the car yet. We know that he's not exactly excited to see Tracy, or he's not going to really rush to the door. But we know by the time he does get to the door, it's probably closer to 10:07, whether that's before, a little bit before, or sometime after. We know that Matt enters a residence at roughly 10:07 p.m. We know also that when he entered the residence, he took off his sandals because Officer Neal came with Officer Guerra, was the second officer in, and from his body cam, you could see that the sandals were at the front of the door. And later, they were disturbed and moved by EMTs who kind of moved around some of the evidence before they were able to secure the scene. This is the evidence showing that his sandals were like that before the scene was disturbed. So we know that Matt came in and politely took off his shoes before the carpet. Kate and Brent Laney, they hear roughly 6 or so gunshots. They talked about a barrage of gunshots and then a little gap and then maybe another one, but they were fairly certain it was 10:07. They were watching a movie with their kids. Caitlin was pretty sure there were gunshots. She was really nervous. Talked about it with her husband for a little bit and couldn't decide whether, because of the time of year, July 12th's in between the July 4th and the second July 4th, which is July 24th, whether those were fireworks or not, but then ultimately decided that she would text Tracy, "Are you guys okay?" And she texts at 10:08:33 p.m. She doesn't hear back from Tracy, talks to her husband some more, looks outside, sees the truck, she remembers what Tracy had told her about her daughter and her husband, and she decides to call the police.
July 12, 2024, 22:06 9:42.
911, what's the address of your emergency?
112 South 920 East, my neighbors,
What city?
American Fork.
And the address one more time?
I'm at 112 South 920 East, it's my neighbors, but
What's the phone number you're calling in case we're disconnected?
559-907-7484.
Okay, so the address is your home, it's your neighbors, and tell me exactly what's going on with them.
I'm pretty sure I just heard gunshots.
July 12.
When Caitlin, the neighbor, gets off the phone, she has her husband call Tracy. 10:13:43 goes unanswered. And it's not until 10:15:46 p.m. that Tracy calls the police. And when you listen to her 911 call, the dispatcher thinks it's Caitlin, and she calls her Caitlin. And Tracy immediately puts this together, and you can hear it in her voice. Her voice drops. But Tracy continues to tell 911 that Matt came into the house with a knife and that Kevin shot him. He then asks for an ambulance. She says that Matt is still breathing. And then about that point, you can hear Officer Guerra knocking on the door, having been previously dispatched by Caitlin.
July 12, 2024, 22:15:45.
911, what's the address of the emergency?
114 South 920 East, American Fork.
Okay, tell me that one more time to make sure that I got it correct.
114 South 920 East.
Okay. And is this Caitlin?
No.
What number in case we get disconnected?
801-651-2695.
And my daughter?
Tracy.
Okay.
My daughter's husband came here. They're going through a separation, and he brought a knife, and my son shot him.
Okay,
I need an ambulance.
okay, I understand, and it's at this home.
Yes,
And who is it to you, your husband?
my daughter's husband.
Okay. Is he conscious or breathing?
I think he's breathing.
Okay, I've got an ambulance out that way. I've also got an officer that's coming into the area. Do you think he's beyond help, or do you think you may be able to CPR? Okay, are you comfortable checking on him? Where is the gun at?
I'm like a kitchen counter
Where is he at?
in the hallway.
Are you comfortable checking to see if he's breathing?
Kevin, check to see if he's breathing, check if he's a pulse, check.
Okay. That may be the officer. Somebody needs to go let them in.
Okay. They're here.
Okay, I'll go ahead and let. Okay, I'm gonna.
Now you can hear from that audio when Officer Guerra knocks on the door and how quickly Kevin answers that door. By the time that Tracy calls the police, they're already in position. Kevin's already in the front room, separated between Tracy and Matthew, who's in the hall, and Catherine's upstairs.
July
Officer Arguera opens the door. You can see that it's dark inside. There's no lights on inside the house. There's no bug screen on the door. You can see the blanket draped over the couch as he walks in. And you hear Kevin. You see Kevin. He's acting like it just happened. And this happened over 8 minutes ago, 7, 8 minutes ago. What does he say? He says, Guy, guy had knife, and I. And it's a little bit choppy and hard to hear because Officer Guerra keeps talking over him. But if you listen to it, you can hear him say, guy had knife, and I.
How's it going? What's going on? Can I come in? What's going on? What's going on? Go ahead. Where is she?
That's not a guy. That's Kevin's brother-in-law that he's known for 15 years. And he's acting like he doesn't even know who came in, like some intruder just came in with a knife. Ten 19:37 p.m., a few minutes later, Officer Neal pats down Kevin.
So I'm gonna have you stand up. I'm just gonna pat you down real quick, okay? You don't have any weapons on you or anything like that? Nothing you're made aware of?
I know I got the holster that's in my pocket. That's it.
Okay. Okay, take a seat. Kevin?
At almost the exact same time that Kevin's being searched, Officer Laycock takes Kate out of the house. And as he's taking her out of the house, she tells him that she heard yelling. She was expecting her husband to come so they can have a conversation, and she heard yelling.
I'll have you come out here with this officer, okay?
I know.
You're okay. It's okay. It's okay. What's going on tonight?
Something could be a I was upstairs waiting for him. I don't know what happened. I don't know what. I heard yelling and I don't know what.
Do you have any weapons or anything?
No, it's the only thing.
I'm just gonna check you real quick, okay? I'm sorry, I know this is...
No. I have my earbuds in my pocket. That's the only thing I have in my pocket.
Sorry, is that the
Yeah,
this
that's what I was
okay.
gonna do.
Okay, you're good. I don't see anything else on it. You're good if you want to go take a seat next to her on the grass, okay? I searched her for weapons. She's good.
Then 22, still fairly soon after the incident, all the parties are still outside. Officer Simpson arrives on scene. Talks to Kevin. Kevin admits to shooting Matthew. Officer Neal asks Officer Simpson to go kind of keep an eye on Tracy and Kate. And at this time, Tracy is panicking. Remember, this is only still a few minutes from when she called the police. She's panicking because she knows that Caitlin had called the police. She doesn't know what time Caitlin called the police. She doesn't know if their pre-plan is going to hold up. And the pre-plan was this. Kate would stay upstairs so she could have plausible deniability, that they would shoot and kill Matthew, that would put a knife in his hand. They had to wait, one, to put a knife in his hand before they had to wait for him to die, because even you could hear Kevin saying, be careful, he still might be moving. It's not easy to put a knife in somebody's hand that's still alive. And two, you couldn't risk that Matthew survived, because if he survived, then they were all in trouble. So that's why there was the delay. But Tracy doesn't know how long it was before Caitlin called or what Caitlin told the police. So the plan had been that Matt came in, that there was some sort of confrontation with Kevin, Matt had a knife, and that Kevin shot him in self-defense. And Matt was an intruder, he just came into the house, uninvited, shot. And it was self-defense. So when you hear Tracy on the lawn, and you can see her panicking, you can see the panic in her face, and she's trying to get over to Kate so she can tell her, like, hey, I just got this new piece of information. And she's not able to do that because Officer Neal clearly sees that something weird is going on. He goes back over there. So what does Tracy do? She yells, Kevin, I don't know what to do. Don't say anything. She doesn't say, I don't know what's going on. She says, I don't know what to do. That's her saying, look, the plan is gone awry. It's off.
your name, man? Kevin? What's going on, Kevin? Is this your home?
It's not.
Okay.
Hey man, I get some information from it. You might just hang out with those two.
Yep. I'm just hanging out with you guys.
Can I
Can you what?
hold my daughter?
Yeah. You could, yeah. Were you separated by officers? Did the officers separate you two?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. If you would like to sit next to your daughter, you're
I
welcome
wouldn't
to.
touch her.
No, that's okay. You know, are they okay sitting next to each other? Oh, okay, never mind, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I just
No,
want to.
I do need you to be separated.
Fine, fine.
But that was my bad. If you want to pick up your phone and come back over here later, that would be great. That's okay.
We're gonna go through an interview process. We typically will keep all parties separated. Don't stay right here with me. That's how you just stay separated for right now.
I have no idea what to do, so don't say anything, please, because I don't know what.
Okay?
Hi.
Really need you to be patient so we can move you guys around, okay?
Hi.
All right.
You also know this is what's going through Tracy's head. Because after there'd been a murder at her house, after she goes to the police station and she gets back home, what time does she send Caitlin Laney a text? 5:17 a.m. Saying thank you. Casual, right? 5 o'clock in the morning, said murder at your house. Doesn't hear back from her, so she sends her another text a little over an hour later. Long, long night. She's trying to get Caitlin to engage in her so she can find out what time she called. Finally, at 6:57 a.m., Caitlin responds, was it your son-in-law? There's some small talk back and forth, and finally, Tracy just says, what time did you call 911? Caitlin, still thinking and responding to the small talk, says, yes, huge, huge hugs, get some rest, please let me know if we can help. Tracy realizes that last one was a little strong. She backs up a little bit. Did you call 911? Or did another neighbor? Tracy knows it was Caitlin, and she needs to find it out. I was on a phone call with 911, and they were there so fast. Caitlin says, I called it 10:07. Obviously, Caitlin is confusing what time she heard the shots versus what time she called. But at that point, Tracy now has the timeline that she needed and what she'd been worrying about. Is it possible to put that down for a second? To black screen. And it's why Tracy's story changed from the 911 call to Matt came in with a knife. My son Kevin shot him. Her story with Nikosha where she doesn't know the timeline, where she's like, I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. Just came in, he said hi, he turned the corner, and he was shot and killed. I have no idea where Kevin is. It's a complete turnaround because she didn't know what she could say because she didn't know how long her window was for when 911 was called. At this point, I want to talk about what is evidence and what is not evidence. Evidence is what is presented to you before trial, the stuff that you've seen in the trial, the exhibits, the stuff you hear from the witnesses. What is not evidence is anything I'm saying, not anything that any of the attorneys have said. That's not evidence. You only consider what you've actually seen from the witnesses, physical exhibits, and things that will go back with you. Now, there are two different kinds of evidence. You have what's called direct evidence, and you have circumstantial evidence. And if I could turn your attention to jury instruction 22. Now, the law treats direct evidence and circumstantial evidence exactly the same. Direct evidence can prove a fact by itself. It usually comes from a witness who perceived firsthand the fact in question. For example, if a witness testified he looked outside and saw it was raining, that would be direct evidence that it had rained. In this case, direct evidence would be defendant saying, I shot him, or I was afraid for my life, so I shot in self-defense.
I was afraid for my life and I shot in self-defense.
That would be an example of direct evidence that Kevin shot and killed Matthew Restelli. Another example of direct evidence would be when Kate testified that the defendant was back at the house after sushi when Tracy went over the plans to murder Matt that night. That is direct evidence that Kevin was involved in the murder and the conspiracy of Matt. There's also another kind of evidence called circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence is indirect evidence. It usually comes from a witness who perceives a set of related events, but not the fact in question. However, based on the testimony, someone could conclude that the fact in question had occurred. For example, if a witness testified that she looked outside and saw the ground was wet, people were closing their umbrellas, that would be circumstantial evidence that it had rained. In this case, an example of circumstantial evidence would be Matt lying face down on the ground when Officer Guerra arrives. That would show that no life-saving measures had been done on Matt. First of all, he's not on his back, so being on the front with a knife in his hand, it doesn't seem possible to do life-saving measures there. Again, when he starts CPR, he hears Matt's ribs crack, so nobody had attempted CPR previously. That would be circumstantial evidence. Nobody had completed life-saving measures on Matt. There's also circumstantial evidence that Matt was shot soon after entering the house. He died close to the front door. The bullet casings were all in the front room. There was a blanket covering the couch right next to the door. Tracy had taken down the bug netting. Kate had moved the toys to a different room. These show that there was a plan to shoot Matt as he walked through the front door. That's corroborated by the physical evidence on the scene, the circumstantial evidence on the scene. Now, I want to talk to you about what the burden the state carries when proving the defendant guilty. When the trial started, the defendant is presumed innocent. But now that the evidence has been presented, and after closing statements, it will be up to you to determine whether the state has met its burden of proving this case beyond a reasonable doubt. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt does not mean, and we can go to Exhibit 21 if you want to read where that is. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt does not mean that proof that overcomes every possible doubt. It does not require disproving all possibilities or other theories. All that is required is that you are firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt. I like to think of a box, and imagine a box, and the box, evidence can go into the box. And there's a line inside the box that says firmly convinced. And when the evidence reaches that point on the line, that reaches the firmly convinced, and that's the point where you can convict the defendant. You are firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt. Now, each person will have a different box, because not all of us are the same. So some people may have a bigger box or a different line, because every person will be different about what point they are firmly convinced. For some people, it could be a single piece of evidence. It could be one single piece of direct evidence where Kate said, Kevin was there when Tracy told us the murder was going to happen, and he was in on it. It could be one piece of evidence. Or it could be a combination of direct and circumstantial, of all the other circumstances surrounding the incident. That's the reason it does not require the state to prove every possible outcome. It just requires that each of you is firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt. Now, I'd like to turn your attention to the instructions. If we could start with instruction 43. And this is the murder form that you look at when you decide whether Kevin is guilty of murder or not. And you go through the form, and it's just, can the state prove these things? That Kevin Stanley Ellis intentionally or knowingly caused the death of Matt Restelli, intending to cause serious bodily injury to another. Kevin Stanley Ellis committed an act clearly dangerous to human life that caused the death. So 1 and 2 are undisputed. Then it comes down to number 3, whether the defense of perfect self-defense does not apply. And the defense of habitation does not apply. So if you find that perfect self-defense does not apply, that you believe it was an ambush, which would also mean that defense of habitation does not apply, at that point, you would go to the roadmap on section 42, which would then take you to the explanation of imperfect self-defense, 55. Imperfect self-defense applies, and you only do this if you found the defendant guilty of murder. If you find him not guilty of murder, you don't need to continue. But if you do find him guilty of murder and that though self-defense does not apply, defense of habitation does not apply, then you have to also find whether the state has proven that imperfect self-defense does not apply. And if we could go to the middle part, imperfect self-defense applies when the defendant caused the death of another while incorrectly but reasonably believing that his conduct was legally justified or excused. Again, an ambush wouldn't help on imperfect self-defense. So if you found that imperfect self-defense did not apply, then you would go to the special verdict form. And then you would find that if the state has shown that imperfect self-defense does not apply, you would check the state has proven beyond a reasonable doubt, the bottom one, that imperfect self-defense does not apply. If you found that the state has not met its burden, you would check the top one. The defendant, let's talk again about Kevin. Kevin wasn't dragged into this. He wasn't dragged into murdering Matt. The defendant chose to murder Matt. After the murder was done, he acted exactly like someone who had committed murder would act. And then he did what he needed to do to make it look like self-defense. Let's talk about how Matt acted. Matt was not angry. He was not violent when he came to the defendant's house. He believed that his wife and kids wanted to come home.
You gonna come inside? Are you gonna come inside and help me load up? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The front door is always unlocked, okay?
So that's all Matt knew. Nothing ever changed between that time and the time he got there. He thought, obviously he wasn't excited to see Tracy, but he thought he was welcome to come in. There's no reason for him to be acting mad or agitated. We also know that from the text messages that he received that day between Tracy and Kate, hey there, please let Matt know he's welcome to spend the night, that she'll be as sweet as candy. Well, if you guys want, I can give you $100 or towards a hotel, or so you can stop if you need to. Okay, Kate says, I'll tell him. Very good. And again, 8:13 p.m., she's still asking him to come inside.
Okay.
I don't want this lead to just running all the time, so I don't have to risk it not starting anything.
That's fine.
So, is that okay?
That's fine. Yeah, you're gonna come in though, right?
Yeah, but I just want to make it like easier or like hang on.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be easy. No, it's gonna be easy.
Okay. So you had Kate put cardboard down. Kate put cardboard down. He was given the gate code, 9 o'clock after the last communication. There's no fighting. There's nothing that could even happen to have changed what Matt knew. Parks over the cardboard, politely. He takes his shoes off, respectfully, to not step on the carpet. It's not something that somebody who's angry or agitated would do. Now, Kate initially told police, Officer Laycock, that she heard yelling. Tracy did not. Tracy told Detective Nicosia she didn't hear anything. She said that Matt was there, said, "Hi, where's Katie?" She said, "He's up the stairs." And that she said, he looked agitated, turned around the corner, and then she heard gunshots. So we know that there was no confrontation. And how do we know that? Because if there had been a confrontation, Tracy would have said there was a confrontation because it would have bolstered her claim. So we can assume that it didn't happen. There was no confrontation. Tracy told the truth about what she could tell the truth about. If that had been the truth, she would have said it. But Kate didn't know that the plan had changed, so that's why she said that she heard yelling. Again, Tracy also said she didn't know where Kevin was. She had no idea. So if Kevin had ran in fear and ran to get a gun, Tracy would have said that too, because that also would have bolstered the plan, because it was true. But because Tracy didn't say that to the police, it wasn't true. It's also why she says she didn't see a knife. She doesn't say when Matt came in that she saw a knife. She can only say that he was holding a knife after. But initially she told the police that Matt came in with a knife, and they completely backtracked that. In fact, their own expert testified that the knife had been planted. People that act in self-defense do not plant weapons in the people that you just shot if you believe that you were justified. That is what people do that do murder, not self-defense. The knife was planted. Tracy planted the knife. Pretty obvious on all the evidence, but even their own expert had to say, yes, that was obviously planted. Shot through the wrist, being held backwards. Probably the most obvious was the blood staining on the carpet. Not matching the wounds. None of that blood could match any of the wounds. Had to have come from the wrist. And we know that the knife probably came from, Tracy. She's the one that had access to it in California when she's searching up my tactical promos, and she showed Kate it a few days before the shooting. She showed Kate the knife. And if Matt had brought the knife, Kate's not pleading guilty to murder. Now let's look at Kevin. What do we know about Kevin? We know that on June 15th, Kevin had found his purpose. He won. He's going to nationals in pool. He's really good. Really good. Good enough to compete in nationals. Yes, Tracy says. You're getting $550 a person for travel expense. He's really excited. Really excited. So, in early August, when Tara Lynn's getting text messages from Kate and Tracy, like, oh, I get it, Kevin's mad at me. Of course he's mad at them. This whole thing was for Kate, and Tracy's plan didn't work, but he's the only one that got charged. So of course he's upset. The plan he was told was going to work didn't. What else do we know? Well, we know that Kevin was aware of Kate's credit card, the Costco credit card, so she could drive out on June 20th. We know that Kate sent him the voicemail between Diane and Tracy saying that it was just a breather, that Kate just needed some space, which wasn't true. We know that, and this is the Costco card, if you want to look at 618. Tracy says the card came in the mail. She doesn't have to explain what the card is, because it's assumed that Kevin knows what it is, because they've talked about it. GPS. And again, Tracy sends him this text message that she got from Matt. Text me the address where my kids are by tomorrow morning. You don't text me the address, I'll be calling the sheriff for kidnapping. And how does Kevin respond? How about no? Does that sound like a pawn or a participant? And again, let's go to June 26th. Well, we know also as early as June 21st, when Kate asked, can you add Kevin to the AirTag? He's here. Oh, he liked your shitty emoji, Tara Lynn. They laugh about that, right? Kevin gets added to the AirTag. Well, he can track Matt. And then on June 26th, Kate says, what day are you coming back? Wondering for Olaf. Which is very interesting for a couple reasons. One, the family testified that they only talk about Olaf, so the kids don't hear. This is a text message. This is code. Olaf. Interesting as well because when you get a nickname is used to describe a trait about that person. Family has known Matt for over a decade, and the secret nickname they gave him was Olaf, the bubbly, talkative snowman from Frozen. So when the defense gets up here, they say all the ways in which family thought Matt was dangerous, like that he owned a gun legally, or that he liked to have a beer in his hand, often, or that he could get mad because his wife secretly kidnapped his kids without telling him, or that he likes to talk about boring things like mountain biking. Remember what they really thought of Matt when they talked badly about him in secret. We also know that on July 11th, 2024, Kevin was in the vicinity of Kate when she was having that attorney phone call. She did not appear concerned or attempt to hide any of that conversation from Kevin when she's telling the attorney that there had been no abuse in the relationship. And on the morning of July 12th, 2024, the date of the murder of Matthew Restelli, Kate asked Kevin to watch her kids so she can go make her story of not being able to drive or being able to rent the car more believable. So from the time they made up that story the night before, Tracy and Kate, and the time she asked Kevin to watch the kids, they've clearly had a conversation because she's talking to him like she already knows what she's talking about. Does that sound like a pawn or a participant? Later in the day, Kevin gets a call from Tracy at 2:01 p.m. asking him to go to sushi. Then at 2:14 p.m., 13 minutes later, Tracy searches It's Happening meme. Around the same time, she's involved in the ruse with Kate, talking about, oh, I'm so glad you're going back, honey bunches. You know, glad you're going to make it work. Kevin is in the middle of all of it. Shortly after sushi, Kate testified when they came back on the front lawn. Tracy discussed the plans to murder Matt with Kevin and Kate. At 10:01 p.m., Kevin gets a text message from Rachel. Rachel only sent it to Kevin and Tracy, not the one person that actually would need to know that Matt was coming. One person that didn't have Find My, apparently, Kate. It's kind of cryptic the way she sends it. Open Find My, or Find My, where she's, hey, Matt's coming over, here's the situation, when she texted Tim. And then, right as he reads that message, that's where the cocaine is found. The defendant did cocaine that night. Goes downstairs, lays in wait, in the dark, with the blinds open, with the door unlocked, the gun in a holster in his pocket, waiting for Matt to walk inside. Kevin did not perform any life-saving measures. Kate heard him to be careful, might still be moving as Tracy planted the knife. And finally, Kevin participated in the charade when police arrived. He was already in place. He enters that door right as Officer Guerra knocks. There's really no reason for him to be over there if there's been this shooting and they've been in there for 8 minutes. The gun's already on the other side of the table, but he's there like it just happened. Knows his spot in the plan. But there was also no information learned about Matt. On the 12th, there was no new information from any of the family members about Matt and the dangerousness of Matt. All that we heard is that Kate had talked him into coming out. Kate had talked Matt into coming out. Carolyn knew that. She told Rachel, stop talking. Rachel knew it. Tracy knew it. Kate knew it. The only information that changed on the 12th was that Kate knew she couldn't get a divorce the way she wanted it to. She'd have to go back to California if she wanted to get divorced. That's the only new information. And you heard from Tim Ellis, the peacekeeper. And he told you that there was a loose plan in place prior to July 12th, where he would go over if Matt showed up, and they would talk about it, and he would keep the peace. But by July 12th, 2:25 p.m., Kevin's en route to sushi. Rachel's cleared the house out. She got Aurora to come up. She got Jacob to leave. What does she tell Tim? Don't come. Why? Because they don't need a peacekeeper at that point. That's not the plan. Additionally, and finally, let's talk about the architect of the plan. Tracy is the architect of the plan. But also the most important part of a murder plan is the murder. You think Tracy, is it reasonable Tracy had Kate invite Matt out, driving all the way from California, with the murder portion of the murder plan still in question? Remember what Tracy said to Kate. Either Kevin will shoot Matt, and if he won't, then I will. This statement shows that Kevin chose to be a part of that conspiracy. Tracy isn't going to remove the bug screen. She isn't going to move the toys out of the front room. And she especially is not going to put that blanket over the couch all the way to the floor, right next to the door. If the shooter doesn't know that's where he's supposed to shoot Matt, that makes absolutely zero sense. You heard Kate testify that when Kevin was told by Tracy after sushi what the plan was, that his demeanor seemed unchanged. He didn't seem bothered by it. You also heard family members testify Kevin wasn't violent. He was a great uncle, had lots of friends. You also heard that Kevin did cocaine that night. Reason that Kevin did cocaine that night isn't because he's a drug user. It's because he needed that to get over that last little bit of conscience that was telling him not to do it, not to murder his brother-in-law. So in the end, Kevin chose murder, not as a pawn, as a participant. Because Kevin chose to do it, It was an ambush, and there's no self-defense. Patient, perfect self-defense, no imperfect self-defense. Because he's a party to the offense in helping Tracy plant the knife, he's guilty of conspiracy. Because he murdered Matt feet from where his children were. They could have heard the shooting. He's guilty of 2 counts of domestic violence in presence of a child, 1 for each of his little kids that are under 18. Because he used cocaine to help him in this, guilty of possession of cocaine. Because he used a firearm, he's guilty of weapon by a restricted person, because he had cocaine as a user and had a firearm. I would ask you to convict the defendant for all the charges, because this is what the defendant chose to do. Thank you.
Last week, I opened by, of course, referring to the points and principles that apply to this trial. Apply to this effort, a solemn one, by you as peers and citizens of Tattagalla. And that's because these principles are what I asked you to have live in your minds as you took in this case, to assess the burdens, the proof, not the argument, the responsibilities on the government, so that you know you got it right. I would never, in all my years doing this, ever call a case simple. Very simple. In fact, with respect to the lawyers for the government here, they're really intelligent. They're really good at arguing. They're really good at piecing together what they were brought to argue. And unfortunately, the less investigation that's done, the easier it is for them. Though we've already heard in this trial reference to alternative theory. Respectfully, and I do mean it with respect, I submit that it's not the job to fill up the box till they got you to make it think it happened. If you think this happened, you have to acquit. That's what these principles say. It has to be proven, and there has to be nothing outside the box. It's a real possibility. That's what the principle is. Not till we have convinced you to feel good about a verdict. It's when we have proven to you that there's nothing outside the box. That's a real possibility. That's the paradigm, at least I ask, and I submit these principles mean to your extraordinarily solemn and important role and duty. In all these years, I've heard all sorts of people say, how can it be that jurors can render a verdict without thinking about the Matt? You're instructed by the judge. You can't use passion or prejudice or emotion in this process. That's hard. My colleagues have said it's impossible. I don't agree. They said it's hard for them to put jurors to put those things aside and follow the principles. I don't agree. I stand here absolutely confident that you can do it and will do it. I'm not going to play evidence. I don't think I'm going to show evidence. I'd like to have a conversation with you. A conversation about real possibilities. A conversation about evidence and proof versus what wasn't done. Issues about what this happened in this trial compared to what those principles that you have to make your decision based on means. I said at the start, and this is the case, you've got the instructions there, I'm certainly not going to read any of them. You got them. This issue in this case is about what Kevin knew. What Kevin thought. What Kevin did in terms of those thoughts. What are the real possibilities in relation to all of that? Right? Because the proof beyond a reasonable doubt has to be that he knew and he agreed. There can't be any real possibility outside that box. And the proof beyond a reasonable doubt has to be that he did not have a reasonable fear at the time he fired. Not, as Mr. Bertram said, after he fired. Or what the real possibility is of what he realized what his mother had done. I think, and returning to the theme of investigating the burden of proof, the importance of trying, the importance of looking, proving away an alternative theory. At the time he fired, the question is, in his mind, have they disproven what their own witness said existed? Talking a bit about what it seems to me, at least, and I'm in agreement. Mr. Watati is exactly correct. It's the evidence as you see it. It's the evidence as you'll have it. I'll talk in a minute what I think about the fact that you try to prove a case on a stack of cherry-picked texts and call logs and search histories, none of which happen to be Kevin's, almost. This is what their star witness, Kate, the murderer, said she admitted the atmosphere she had created in her family was. Her family includes Kevin. Not just on everything she typed, they had conversations, got a call log. Wonder what was said in the 30-minute call. I'll address it in a minute, but I have an idea about what you might do if you're sworn as a peace officer. And I mean no disrespect to Mr. Detective Nordine. No personal disrespect. It's not about him personally. This is about the law. This is about the constitutional principles. And by the way, the government can ask him to do more at any minute. Or maybe their hired gun they could ask to do something, since they're not involving him with Detective Nordine. But please don't interpret my criticisms of the responsibilities of burden of proof to be personal criticism of Detective Nordine, who's wrapped in, I guess, when they want and left out when they talk to their expert. But what you could do if you want to know what a call meant or a text meant, etc., you could do something. You could ask. You want to know what was meant by these texts? You ask them. Ask people soon. Now, you can't ask everybody. Certainly, you can't ask Kate and Tracy after 3.5 months and they're arrested after that time. You're probably not going to get answers about their texts, but those have people on the other side. But Kate, their witness, who it was well established, cannot be on that stand with her plea deal of 10 years for what she did. unless they agree she told them the truth and all the truth and nothing but the truth and everything leading up to this trial. You saw that. That is their precondition. You have to talk to us, you have to interview with us, you have to write letters to the judge, and all that has to be true, or you don't get your deal. And she said, yeah, I'm the mechanic. I am the means by which I got my husband killed. And I told you it would be just chilling how she did it, and I submit it was. With absolute no evidence suggesting and plenty inferences to be made that Kevin had no idea she was making those calls, no idea she was sending those grotesque texts, and no idea of her luring plan. There is nothing. As a matter of fact, she says he didn't know. Matter of fact, she says he wasn't around. The witness, they said, had to be believed in order to get her deal. And that atmosphere was, he raped me, the words, I was a victim of domestic abuse. I was terrified. The minute I left California, I was terrified. He has guns. The word kidnapping was thrown around. As a matter of fact, purposely texted to Kevin about kidnappings. The words. This is the milieu. This is the atmosphere that Kate admitted she built in her family. And Kate admitted it was done to make everybody on edge. And Kate admitted that she then did the opposite of it, lured him in with no one knowing, and got him killed. And it's clear that atmosphere doesn't need to only come from Kate. I mean, the idea that pieces of your text messaging about all this from sisters, from a family that Kate said, it has to be believed to get her deal. They had nothing to do, of course they had nothing to do with it. Of course they wouldn't do it. Of course these people wouldn't be part of my plan. Of course they didn't. I guess we'll talk about it in a minute, but you saw it. Certainly the state wants to scare those sisters and make them think that they're in trouble. Even today. I want to talk about imperfect self-defense real quick because you heard the jury instructions, and I want to make it clear that if Kevin was wrong, and that's the interesting thing about the knife, right? We didn't need the experts to concede it. I conceded it. Not because of shots in the arm, not because of them being wrong about whether he's left-handed. Because there's no way poor Matt came in there with a knife. Because there's no way, based on what Kate was doing to him with the mastermind mom, that he would think he needed a knife. Whatever was done, if Kevin wasn't informed, if Kevin was used in this by the mastermind mechanic or architect and the mechanic Kate, as Kate says was happening, and it turns out there wasn't a knife, there wasn't a gun. He was wrong when he believed whatever happened. We'll talk about the timeline in a second, but there is no version of this timeline where there's not at least 30, 60, or maybe even 90 seconds of happenings in that house. And two experts agree you can't tell from the crime scene out where everybody moved and how much they moved. And then I just heard the prosecutor say what Tracy would say you can believe. If it had been the truth, she would have said it. So we know that, I guess the state believes it was the truth, when Tracy described to the neighbor Laney, that none of us knew was coming out until this trial, that Matt came in, moved around, came to the right, Kevin went to somewhere she didn't see, and then she saw the shots. Sounds like the state's position, you should believe that part of Tracy's statements to the Mrs. Laney. If Kevin is wrong, and you find that beyond a reasonable doubt, and that he didn't have the belief there was imminent threat to others or himself when he fired the weapon, because he wasn't in fact at risk and no one else was in fact. I submit that they have not disproven that, but it's important to know that imperfect self-defense is still a crime. If you find that, he's guilty of a crime. This conspiracy just doesn't make sense. I won't go through it all. But here's a guy supposed to be in a conspiracy, supposed to be pre-planned. Supposed to know that they have a plan. Now, if you've got a conspiracy and a plan, you're doing your best to make sure it will work. You're probably going to screw up. No one gets all their plans right when they execute them. But the plan, here's a person who has a plan. The evidence is unequivocal that Kevin left cocaine out all over his room, although they didn't take any pictures of it. We luckily caught it from a body cam. When he knew he was going to be, that the house was going to be searched and everything, he left evidence that was found. That the timeline, that you need time, as the expert, Patrick Serpoli, concluded, was time so that they could conspire. That was their expert's conclusion. That delay, and Tracy did get caught. She didn't get as much delay as she wanted because of the lane call. That's why she had to just finally tell Kevin, who she hadn't had time to fully brief. Just don't say anything. She controlled the narrative. She told him not to say anything. She sent the lawyer to Kevin's room. She didn't get the briefing completed. It doesn't take 6 minutes to put a knife in somebody's hand. And the medical examiner says probably about a minute before Matt would die. Maybe a little longer, but right around there. The reality is that you don't need any time. You want to make it look for reals. You have the plan, you do the deed, you call the 911 so you don't look suspicious. And you certainly don't leave the blanket up anymore. Not that you put on the couch. You certainly don't do the things that are going to look like it might be a crime. Kevin certainly doesn't leave cocaine all over. He doesn't come down. Doesn't wear a holster. You don't need a holster if you already know what you're going to do. We had an officer agree you have a holster to have a gun in case you need it. Scene. We have like two experts, theirs and Mr. Bertram, who have to concede you do take the scene, take everything we know and try to use as evidence in courts of law to meet the burden of proof, to try to get the evidence out of it. And what we don't know, both of them, don't really know exactly what the bodies did in there between Matt coming in and being shot. You can't tell from the scene. There's time, there could be body movement, the two people could move about, they could meet for the first time at the corner of that hallway with Kevin in front of the fireplace, which does appear to be the unanimous conclusion of people who tried to look at the scene. We, however, do know, again, up in the upper left, Kevin leaves cocaine on his bedside stand. Doesn't look like a pretty cleaned up stage with his phone. With his phone. Clearly if he saw and read that warrant text, which also confused them all because it turned out not to be accurate, because Matt came about 10 minutes sooner than you would have thought. Surprising. There's Kevin's laptop. It's over by the lamp. All the lights went off. There's the lamp on. The front porch light is on. You can see that clearly from the evidence. And there's a stool pulled out where Kevin's laptop, apparently no one we had to go through packaging and evidence chain of custody to finally get an admission that that's Kevin's. And Tracy should be believed if she told it, saying they're in the kitchen, saying that Matt went around in front of the fireplace, used that Pharaoh to the extent you think it's helpful, but it's pretty interesting and pretty neat to have a 3D ability to walk through that scene and kind of be there. There's a real possibility. It's not a real possibility by my argument. It's a real possibility by the evidence. The body's moved around and something happened. By the way, from everything we know, it's of course a real inference that it's a real possibility that Tracy's doing something to make Kevin think he's gonna be harmed. He's got a gun. He wants to fool. And what is the best explanation for Tracy succeeding in her plan that nobody is disagreeing? It's the two peas in the pod of Tracy and Kate, evidence that they ended up collecting, is convincing that there are two peas in a pod executing their plan to have Matt die. Is to whip up Kevin, and where do you think cocaine came from? Get him to the point of fear and everything else. And frankly, maybe at the end of the day, if it didn't work, as Kate said, Tracy would do it. It's going to be easier with Kevin if he doesn't know. He's a good person. It sounds like nobody's disagreeing with that. We heard all about it. We just heard Mr. Watabe talk about the evidence about Kevin. Took him to sushi, told him he's going to murder somebody, and he was unchanged and came happily back to the house. This cleanup stuff, let's pay attention to the unrefuted evidence that Kevin wasn't part of it, that Kevin was up in his room. He was up there most of the day sleeping it off. He got to go to sushi, which you can see from the text has happened a million times. And then he's not around, according to Kate herself, when things were changed. Look at the bottom right. You've got these photos in much better than I'm going to be able to do here, where he would have been. That's a pretty lame way to make sure no blood gets on the couch. But as you will see in the other picture that you were given that was sent to the house on a different day, that's the way the blankets are in the other picture that is sent by Rachel. It's a blanket on a couch. Why would Kevin know or wonder that there's no toys? His mom's fastidious cleaner. With the door shut, you have no idea that there's not a screen on it. From the inside, you don't know that there's not a screen on that door. And Kate flat says it's unrefuted in this evidence that Kevin wasn't around, wasn't there for it, wasn't part of the scene. That's the scene that's supposed to tell Kevin things are getting ready for a killing. We planned it. And then let's clear up the other stuff you want to do if you want to prove something guilt beyond a reasonable doubt from a crime scene. You heard the DNA people. Don't know if you understood it. Maybe someday you can explain it to me. But one line that I read out of that final point, Kevin Ellis and Matt Restelli cannot be included or excluded as possible contributors to the YST or the male-related DNA evidence. And then, of course, it wouldn't have probably mattered anyway, because I fully expect that on a carpet in that house, Kevin's DNA is everywhere. By the crime scene, however, it seems like all experts and police agree that Kevin's by that fireplace, seeing, that's his perspective. There's a hole in that door. No shots get fired when Matt is anywhere towards the front door from the door that has a hole in it, right? Because you can't make a bullet go in a circle. He's there, no shots are fired until that shot at least, because he can't make that hole from an angle closer to the front door. That's where Kevin is under the evidence, let alone the real possibility. And the hallway entrance there is where Matt is, and he's shot. And now we also know from the forensics and the evidence at the scene, in the front, they are facing each other. When Kevin shoots, they are facing each other. He has been whipped up to believe, by reference to guns, by reference to violence, by reference to agitation, the atmosphere of fear that Kate admits she built is face-to-face with the person. And it's a real possibility more things were built into this by Tracy to make sure it happened. We got a pile of text messages. Let's prosecute a case on paper because we don't have the proof of the crime scene. We can't prove this by the crime scene. We can't, of course, disprove self-defense by the crime scene. They can't do it with DNA. They can't do it with the injuries to Matt. They can certainly make out a conspiracy once they put everything together, get enough proof that Kate gets a deal. We're also just filling in the details. And all that evidence doesn't really have Kevin in it. There's a few cherry-picked things that they could find of information, and that's information that looks like it's fed to Kevin to continue to wrap him in to the atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. And look, just pick those out and put them practically on a board with red yarn. Yeah, I mean, yeah. A good lawyer can do that. Maybe an investigation would leave real possibilities out of the box. I mean, we didn't need Chris Bertram for all of us to understand is just normal common sense. This is what you should use. Common sense. That's why, that's an integral and a critically important part of a jury system, right? Take your experiences that you all have, and you're all different, purposefully, so that you can have more experiences that are different that you use to consider real possibilities. Real possibilities that even if they make you feel uncomfortable, I have to admit they're real possibilities because of the evidence or lack of evidence. You want to know whether you can tie Kevin in. You can't do it with the scene for what applies here, so can't do it with the timeline. There's plenty of time, whether you by the state's timeline, as strict as they want it to be, from the evidence, you can look at it. There's, as Detective Nordine admitted, even after investigation of the timeline, I think the evidence was it could be 30 to 60 seconds different from even Kruger's security camera. So you could go do witness interviews. You want to know what Tara Lynn means by a text? How Tara Lynn was made to feel? What Tara Lynn's heard and said on telephone calls? You don't know anything from a call log. You can pick it and compare it to some text and conjecture. Hey, she's calling right around the time the search was happening. She's calling around. The other thing you could do is ask her. They don't ever try to talk to Tara Lynn. the person who picked Kate up from California, the person who was concerned enough that she thought there should be an air tag in there, the person who did all this discussion. Plus, she's the mover. You saw, she's the one they asked. She's like the ChatGPT. They asked her to do the text that we're going to get sent to Matt. Is it because it might not follow your theory that is so very simple that you've already reached and has already been charged? Go to the scene. Return to the scene. The scene didn't tell you anything on its face. Like you said, walk Tracy through it. She's out. Walk Kate through it some more. Sure, she says she's upstairs the whole time. Okay. Talk to her about that. Talk to her more. You got this evidence they want you to believe. Okay. I heard Kevin's voice say something about, be careful, he may still be moving. And yet, you can see from the interviews and stuff, she then says in her letter to the court for sentencing, and then I heard the doorbell ring. Well, the prosecutors go back out there and talk to her in December because I thought you didn't hear the doorbell ring. I heard a commotion, she claims to the police. Up here now, she doesn't hear a commotion, but we're supposed to believe that little part because they're trying to put Kevin in that planning of the knife. Do surveillance. You got two people that you're learning are killers. 3.5 months you could look around. You could try to find out about their lives. Is there ever a time you've ever heard somebody keep a secret for 3.5 months? I'll tell you who can't. Kate, she talks about the case on Discord while she's smoking pot. Do surveillance. Try to get evidence. Be interesting. Find out if she ever told somebody, for instance, I hope I don't get caught and have to be asked about my brother to get a deal. I get it. Oh, review these new phones. Now you have phones where they have conversed from for 3.5 months. Kate too, and Mom's work phone, I think it's called. I don't know if we even have any of that. The government didn't give you that information. Why? Because it's radio silent? I don't know, because I asked Detective Nordine, and he admitted he hadn't really looked at it very much. And the prosecutor made clear why he hasn't done these things. He's busy. I don't think that matches up too well with those principles. I don't think I heard almost anything about Kate Restelli's testimony, interviews, or anything in Mr. Watabe's opening statement. There's a good reason for that. There's a good reason because they gave her this sweetheart deal. So long as she said what happened, and so long as they believed it. She got the deal. We don't have to be experts in logic to argue that that means the government's position is you should take it. First thing she ever says, it's an actual exhibit. I never discussed anything with Kevin, and my mom kept us apart. Tracy took advantage of Kevin's mental health issues. In the very last paragraph, 18, Catherine never discussed the shootings with Tracy and Kevin. She wouldn't discuss the details with Catherine. And that was enough. She towed that same line. We went over it with her. She towed that same line in her interview, that after which she got her truth-telling deal. Didn't have a conversation with Kevin. He's in his room sleeping. He's not around when we made these preparations of the room. It's my mother's plan, me and my mom. Learned some other things, though, about Kevin, according to her, that they had talked about maybe him being a protector. Kevin offered to protect being a strong male versus a strong male. They had gotten him into a protector's role. When she said Matt was abusive, which we know was still another lie, or at least doesn't seem to be supported by the evidence, whatever he was, whether he made this family on nerve at times, he didn't do what Kate continues to say he did. At least there's no evidence of beating her, even though she said it. Genuinely fearful for my life, she continued to maintain. In her interviews, we got that out. And Kevin said, when he heard any of that, I'll protect you. They certainly built him into a protector. That is the evidence from Kate. That's the evidence from Kate that in relation to the state gave her a truth-telling deal. Then she wrote, you've got this. Everything again. I ran away from abuse. You don't think that she's presenting this to the family? Whether it's in a phone call, around the house, everything else, does she have to text it? Lays out a timeline that isn't convenient for the state. You've got that. That's what you have to believe. It's not just an alternative theory. It's not just a reasonable possibility, a real possibility from thin air. That's evidence. That's from evidence. That's from a sworn witness. We've got to deal with telling the truth. And she said it over and over. Over and over and over. I won't belabor it because that's what I just did. I warned you at the start of this trial that I am not a good PowerPointer. And I want to have a discussion with you, not work it off the PowerPoint. Do you want to know for real from these people whether they, despite how they might talk in their text messages that you never went ask them about? What did you mean by this? Why'd you say LMAO? Doesn't seem to be a very funny subject. It has to do with just the way we lost things. I don't know. Go find out what these text messages mean by the texters. Go find out about the family. Go find out about Kevin. Go find out about the mother. Unfortunately, you learned right here at this trial that these poor people didn't know what has now been proven, and they agree with it, is that Tracy lived a completely double life. That's how successfully manipulative she is. She's a sex worker, criminal record, doing things that she kept from her family, and then she was the mom's side. And when you have someone you could go interview, you could ask to testify like Rachel did. You ask her to put her hand up and swear an oath and get information from her. You don't ever go there and do those questions to her and present her the materials and try to understand them in a context she can give you. Do you think this is a person who's hiding something? A criminal? You wait till she's on the stand before a jury and you ambush her with them. Once you've done that, what do you think the likelihood that Carol Ann down there in the lower right of the grilling picture with Tim, Kevin, and Jacob, what do you think the likelihood that that person's ever going to take the risk of getting on a stand and telling her truth? It's a strategy to avoid getting evidence to the jury, not to get evidence. But she did testify. Carol did testify. Thankfully, before all that happened, before the government did that, they introduced text messages. And in those text messages includes Terrell Ann texting that day with Matt on the way. I meant to get him. I meant to read him a little bit. Lucky for you, I didn't. But you may recall we did it in the trial. And here's what Carolyn's testimony was. I'm worried. I want peace. Tracy had called up the peacemaker. I don't know if he'll be mad, so mad and stewing on the drive that it will be bad. But I pray that it won't. I pray it won't be bad. She is live streaming practically in these text messages the government gave me, her testimony about how she hopes there will be peace, and she's terrified that there won't be, because she just doesn't know how Matt's going to show up. That's representative of the family's circumstance, and Kevin's in the family. These aren't real possibilities from thin air. These are real possibilities from the evidence. As lacking as the investigation with all the tools you heard Mr. Bertram talk about that police have, as lacking as that is, we at least got that. We at least know that evidence. We didn't need to rely only on, the antipas too tough on, Detective Mordine. Blame me. Don't hold it against the case of defending Kevin Ellis, defending, more importantly, the principles that apply in this case. But we didn't need it, even for just to show confirmation bias. He shot, he's guilty. Oh, I found 2 peas in a conspiracy pod. Let's toss Kevin into that. He shot. It's very simple for according to the prosecutor. Yeah, you even hire an expert you don't even introduce to your case agent who gets on a stand, is caught flatly blowing it with regard to crime scene investigation, and thanks to the return of the follow-up questions from the prosecutor, we learned I still wouldn't have changed my mind. The mind is made up. I know what you hired me to say. He shot, therefore he conspired. The blood on the wall shows that it was staged. Or should an honest investigation be something you demand and it show respect for you as jurors? The whole system, and you're putting in this position. An honest investigation. Scorch the earth. Surveil. Do something as basic as interview. Talk to Tara Lynn. Talk more to Rachel, who has been willing to talk and testify. Talk to Tim. You heard Tim. Yeah, I was surprised. Nobody ever wanted to hear anything from me till a couple weeks before when we put Tim on the witness list, and so they just popped in and stole him and put him on in their own case. That's what Tim told you. Week before is when they talked to Tim. Go back to Tracy. I mean, it's crazy. Can you imagine what the police could have done with Tracy Grist? With Kate in 3.5 months of them thinking they'd gotten away with it? I don't know. Are you afraid that that investigation may present real possibilities that you can't prove what the rules and the constitutional principles require you to prove? I hope not. There'll be a real possibility that Kevin didn't know, that he confronted in those circumstances that he did have a reason, because he had been put there, according to the evidence, as a protector. Who's Kevin? Protector. I mean, they don't know or care after that. You don't go talk to anybody about Kevin. They don't learn about it. But we do know a happenstance that his whole life is built around billiards. He's going to the Nationals in 2 weeks or so. But he goes to sushi and agrees to be a murderer, right? Let me get this murder stuff out of the way. It doesn't make any sense at all. The more you investigate and learn about Kevin, it's gonna make less sense, so just don't. I'll protect you, that's in evidence. That's my role, that's in evidence. I basically otherwise play pool and I get takeout with my mom. Go through the text if you want. I love and trust my family. That's tragic. So did his sisters. And look what was it Rachel said, we're processing this the best we can. This is his contact in their phone. If you see it, the contact in their phones is Kevin from heaven. Tracy was right. So was Kate. Kevin is easy to manipulate. Sad. You can make him feel bad about himself. You can use that as is described by Kate. Make him do something to set him up to do it. Is that a real possibility? Of course it is. That's the evidence. Who's Tracy? Double life. Mastermind. Lies to everyone, including her family. She controls the narrative. Hey, don't say, hey, go lawyer, go talk to Kevin. Kevin, don't say anything. I'll talk to the police. I'll talk to Diane. You heard Diane talk about that. Tracy's whispering in Kate's ear even when they're talking to poor Diane. She's the architect. State agrees with that now. Who's Kate Restelli? Pothead, hedonist, liar, drama queen on Discord. Apparently convincing enough to get guys there to puff up and say they'll go take care of Matt. But still, they make her their star witness. She got a deal. And then even then, I don't know, somewhere deep inside, because of family, when pressed on all of her statements, she couldn't get to the lie that Kevin knew. As a lawyer, I'm gonna think later what I missed. I'm gonna get told probably by some colleagues. It's not about me, it's not about this, it's his argument. But, oh, that's right, I did have these notes. I wanted to just stop there because you paid close attention. You knew your job was to look for any real possibility that the state hasn't met these incredible burdens. That there are alternatives, including imperfect self-defense, if that's what you as deliberators come to. One thing I've added to this slide is extraordinarily important because it dovetails with all of these principles and with the notion of peers. Peers on this jury, you're going to talk, you're going to use your common sense, you're going to deliberate, you're going to do a great job. You might not agree. There's jury instruction that says at the end of all, while you do all that, you need to hold on to your own personal convictions. You are still individuals in the jury room, and our system is based on the fact that 8 people have to agree entirely, all of them. That's an important principle. It's built in on purpose into our system. It's humane. Went through this trial and you know, there's the state's theory, and then they focus on pieces of evidence that would support it. They want to say you are enough to fill the box, and then there's this evidence that doesn't make sense. There's this stuff that provides real possibilities that isn't exactly what happened, or at least we haven't investigated enough to know. And we don't need it, or a counter, Or why didn't you talk to Terrell Lynn? Well, I don't know, I would have tipped her off sometime in the last 18 months. And excuses. And when I was a kid, there was this Aesop fable. And it was about, and it's lived a little bit in my legal career. And it is a wolf and a stag meet at a stream in the woods. And the wolf growls and says, "You are muddying the water I'm drinking." And the stag says, "I'm drinking downstream." And the wolf growls and says, "You're part of a plot to kill my father 2 years ago." And the stag says, "I'm 9 months old." And the wolf growls, says, "You are good at coming up with answers, but I'm going to eat you all the same." That's what the state's asking you to do. You're going to hear now, again, from the state. That's how big a deal these are. It is so important and such a burden. They get to go first and last. I would sell my house to get to be able to do that. But while they go second and last, I'm just going to ask you, in fairness, when you hear the points made by, I think it's going to be Mr. Pomeroy, think to yourself, what would Williams say? What would Ramos say? What would the defense say? What does the evidence say? What would it, if I got a chance to get back up here and talk again after the prosecutor, please just think of that, in fairness. I also want to say that throughout the trial, it's dynamic, and you're human beings, and you could have reactions, and you could have feelings about it, and you might have negative ones. And it might be about something someone did. It might be me, or it might be Alex. Positive won't be about Marissa. Hold those against us. If you have any, hold them against us. Or if you thought we made a mistake or did a bad job, hold that against us. Person who sat furthest away from you for 1.5 weeks. This human being, your peer, that's what these principles are here to protect. I've made my ask of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Pomeroy on the rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor, we need to connect.
All right, we'll call the state here while you connect.
Okay. Well, story time's over. Let's talk about the facts again. The murder of Matthew Restelli was a needless tragedy. It was an unreasonable tragedy. There is overwhelming evidence that Matthew was lured to his death, and that the crime scene was staged with a knife planted in his hand. Even the defense admits this much. And during this trial, the defense has attempted to portray Kevin Ellis as a hero. That's the word they used during trial. And during their argument today, they said protector. They want you to believe Kevin was a white knight rushing in to save the day. But the truth is, Kevin was a cold-blooded murderer, lying in wait to kill his brother-in-law. And this dichotomy is what this case is about. The law does not require you to resolve every mystery connected to this case, or every question connected to this case. All the law requires you to do is answer whether Mr. Ellis is guilty of murder and conspiracy. Everything else is just noise. And that's what you heard during that argument. Noise. We need to separate the noise from the constitutional principles we all believe in. We need to separate the noise from the law that the judge has instructed you on. Separate the noise and focus on the evidence. Not what the defense counsel thinks, not what they're interested in finding out, not the information on the slides that was never introduced into evidence. Simply the evidence. So let's cut through that noise. Let's look at what the evidence tells us what happened. Now first, Kate told you what happened. She plainly testified that she and Tracy and Kevin conspired together to murder Matthew. We talked a lot about Kate and her incentives. You'll judge it. But note one thing that was very clear. When Kate truly believed something, she pushed back. She pushed back against Mr. Brown. She pushed back against Mr. Williams on 2 points. That she believed that what Matthew did to her was abuse. I think we could all agree at this point, she was not raped by Matthew. Asking your wife for sex, even when she doesn't want to, is not the same as forcing her to have sex. And she admitted as much, but she still saw it as abuse. She pushed back on that. And what else did she push back on? Had that conversation with Tracy and Kevin after sushi. She did not back down from that. That conversation happened. The defense argues that if there was a crime, Kevin was a pawn, played by 2 manipulative women. But as I told you in the opening, you should judge Kate's testimony and everything else you hear by what can be corroborated, what the independence confirms about what you heard. Corroboration is the quiet truth. So let's listen to what it has to tell us. The evidence. 2 very different ideas. Kevin was a pawn, he was a dupe, or he was a participant. We don't have evidence. We don't have evidence that he was a pawn. We have speculation, we have innuendo, but not evidence. We have evidence he was a participant. There's the tracking. He was tracking weeks before the murder. He was tracking the day of the murder. He got that text. Orem, find mine. There was preparation. He babysat Kate's kids to make her lies more believable. Had to create that ruse that she went to the car rental company. No, everyone knew she had 0 intent going back home with Matthew. The home was prepared. Toys were put away. The screen door was taken down. There was a blanket put on the couch. 2 youngest children were kept away. A cardboard was put out front. Gate code was sent from that. The lights were turned out. Curtains were open. And look, Kevin was home for all of this. And you might reasonably believe 1 or 2 of these things Kevin didn't see or notice. All of them? No. Kevin knew preparations were being made. That's like what Kevin put on a gun and a holster. He knew. Then he waited in the front room for Matthew to arrive. He was part of the preparation. And there's the communications. Text messages with Kate. He'd rush back if Olaf came. He'd rush back to be there when Matt was there. There was deleted text messages by Tracy, to be clear. Why would she do that? Why the messages with Kevin? Because she knew there was incriminating evidence there. And you can draw that inference too. There was the lunch, then that post-lunch discussion with Kate and Tracy. Or was over, think about the situation. Kate and her kids, and Tracy and a couple of her kids, and Kevin are all living in the same home. They didn't need to put into text messages, into phone calls, what they needed to put to Tara Lynn living out of state, or Rachel living far north of here. They just talked about it. You can draw that conclusion that by living together, they could just talk down the hallway to each other. They communicated in advance of this murder. There was the cover-up. There was the planting of the knife that everyone agrees happened. There was the statement to be careful. Careful, because Matt might still be kicking. There's the statement that he told the police that that guy had a knife. That he was afraid for his life, so he shot. Not afraid for Kate, that's not what he said. Not afraid for Tracy or the home, that's not what he said. He was afraid for his life, so he shot. And shoot he did. 7 times, 3 times in the back. No evidence of any struggle. No evidence of arguments. No evidence that Matt had a weapon. There is no evidence of anything else other than that Kevin was shot moments after Matt entered the home, took off the sandals, and closed the door. And that holds, regardless of whether you believe it was 1 second or 1 minute. These varying timelines don't actually matter under this evidence. All the evidence together disproves of this self-defense. In fact, the timeline proposed by the defense is worse for Mr. Ellis than what the state has said. Under the state's theory, he could have at least claimed, or the argument could have been made, I should say, that he was surprised. But if it was a minute and a half, where Matt walks around, takes his shoes off, he knows who it is. He's not surprised. He doesn't need to shoot, because again, no evidence of agitation, no actual evidence of struggle, no actual evidence of an argument, no evidence Matt had a knife. Even under the expanded timeline, he should have never shot Matthew. Altogether, the direct evidence, the circumstantial evidence, and the inferences you can draw show that Kevin was not a pawn. He was a knowing, voluntary, full-throated participant in this conspiracy. Now, in contrast, this direct and circumstantial evidence was that noise I spoke about, the speculation, the innuendo, the incorrect interpretations of the facts. Trials are about whether a defendant committed a crime, not whether the investigation was perfect, and it's not about whether someone else was involved. You are not here to pass judgment on Kate, on Tracy, on Rachel, on Tara Lynn, Detective Nordine, Patrick Serpoli, or any other aspect of the investigation. Only Kevin, and whether the evidence adduced proves him guilty or not. Was the police investigation perfect? No, it was not. And of course not. Common sense tells you there's always one more thing that you could do. Always one more thing 18 months down the road that in retrospect, yeah, maybe I could have done that. The important part is whether the investigation that was done produced sufficient evidence. And here it produced volumes of evidence against Mr. Ellis and his co-conspirators. Enough evidence to prove Kevin guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. There's a saying, if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, then every day would be Christmas. And that's the defense argument. There's lots of ifs and there's lots of buts. But that's not the world we live in. It's not Christmas every day for them. I don't want you to ignore something you might find important. I want you to keep in mind the actual standard, and that is, given the evidence you have, are you firmly convinced? And in the end, there is no evidence that Kevin had any basis to believe he or anyone else was in imminent harm that night, the standard in the law the judge gave you. And there is no evidence that Kevin acted reasonably under the circumstances. Again, the word in the law the judge gave you. The evidence we have disproves self-defense. It disproves the idea, the speculation that Kevin acted reasonably. There is absolutely nothing in the laws of the state of Utah that allows you to hit a line of cocaine, put on a holster, grab a gun, let your sister lure someone into a home, lie in wait in a darkened room, and then shoot your brother-in-law moments after he walks in the door. That is murder. That is not self-defense. There is nothing in the evidence that provides any basis to support either perfect self-defense or imperfect self-defense. And you do not need to willfully blind yourself to the evidence or legitimate inferences because of those ifs and because of those buts. When you apply the common sense to the evidence, your answer should be clear. Kevin was an integral part of the conspiracy. He was the trigger man. He was the one who completed the conspiracy. Kevin murdered Matthew, and the evidence disproves speculative self-defense claims. Now, before I end, just want to point out two more things. One is about the jury instructions. Instruction 47 talks about the imminency and reasonable requirements for perfect self-defense. And instruction 55 talks about the reasonableness requirements for imperfect self-defense. And Kevin Ellis did not have any imminent danger that he was facing. You're supposed to consider factors like the nature of the danger, the immediacy, the probability that there was unlawful force coming at him, whether Matthew was violent, patterns of violence, and other relevant factors. We've gone over the evidence numerous times. I don't need to tell you this, but the evidence shows there was no imminency that Kevin was responding to. He was not under a reasonable belief that he needed to shoot Matthew. There's nothing in the evidence to indicate any form of reasonableness. The second point I wanted to make to you was about reasonable doubt. Again, I've called this noise from the defense argument speculative, because it's not based in the evidence. It's based in maybes. During this whole trial, you didn't hear a single witness testify that anyone told Kevin Matt was dangerous, or that he had a knife, or that he was coming to rape Kate or commit any other crime or imminent harm. You haven't seen a single text message or heard a single call or seen any other evidence to support the story that Kevin thought Matt was dangerous. Doubts must arise from the evidence, not imagination. And despite the arguments, the noise, the proposed doubts, those are not reasonable. Evidence is that Kevin was not afraid of Matt. He ridiculed Matt. He called him Olaf. He used a poop emoji to track him. He tracked Matt. He did. He knew Matt was coming. He was warned by his sister that Matt was just minutes down the freeway. Got that gun and holster. Not because he was scared. Not because he was a hero. Because that was the plan. He did what Kate and Tracy and he planned to do that day. He shot Matt when he came in the home. The defense argument amounts to this. The state must disprove every theory, every possible doubt, every interpretation. But that is not the standard. Reasonable doubt has to be reasonable. And their speculation today is not reasonable. If you are firmly convinced that Kevin committed murder, if you are firmly convinced we disprove self-defense, if you are firmly convinced he was part of the conspiracy, that's enough. Kevin killed Matthew in cold-blooded, callous murder. The fact is he had choices all throughout the days and hours leading up to that murder. He didn't have to shoot Matt. Remember, there was a peaceful option. The plan that involved him. The plan that was called off. If there was truly any perceived danger for Matt, he could have called the police. Instead, Kevin was the danger. The danger to Matt. He didn't have to shoot Matt, but he chose to. And for that choice, you should convict him of his crimes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crowell. Ladies and gentlemen,